everyone. I am back tonight with you on our Testimony Tuesdays, and tonight I have my dear friend, Janet Cerqua. Janet currently serves on our board of directors and has been an amazing encourager to me and to the care ministry. So Janet, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm going to start with telling you what I'm not, and that is I'm not a native Texan. Because when I open my mouth and speak, most people ask me, "You aren't from Texas, are you?" And I say, "No, I'm from Oregon." I was born and raised in the state of Oregon. I am one of 11 children, I have 10 brothers and sisters. Grew up there and moved to Texas in '91, but prior to that, I got my degree in nursing and began my nursing career in Oregon.
Awesome, thank you. Well, speaking of Oregon, I want to just take this opportunity to offer some prayers to the community up there that's being affected by the wildfires. So if you're watching this, if you will just please keep those, everyone that's affected right now by the wildfires, it would mean a lot to us. Janet, I know, has some family up there. And I mean, we got her to Texas, but she still has a lot of family in that area. So please be praying for everyone affected by those wildfires. Okay, Janet, I just want to dive in. And I know that sometimes I struggle, and I think we've talked about this before. It's sometimes difficult for those of us who have kind of come a long way in our journey healing from our abortion to really share the heartbreak of abortion, because abortion's ugly and it's heartbreaking, obviously, but God has done such a work in our lives that it's not quite the emotional baggage that it once was. But would you mind just kind of taking us back to that season of your life when you were faced with a decision to abort, what led you to that decision, and share a little bit about how it affected you back then?
BJ, I do agree with you, because as I sat down after you asked me if I would be willing to do this, and I began to think about it, I realized that it's been 39 years since I aborted my baby. And it's amazing to me, the healing and where I'm at today versus where I was 39 years ago. The pain and the rawness and the emotion is gone, something I will never forget. But it's in a place of my heart now where I can deal with it. And so as we talk about it tonight, it may not sound really heartbreaking to many people, but abortion is heartbreaking no matter where you are in the healing process.
Yeah. So what led you, why did you choose abortion?
So I was 28 years old, married to my husband at that time. And we had decided after 5 years of being married to start a family. I had no problem getting pregnant. Saw my doctor, and I got a phone call after that visit from him, and he said to me, "Janet, you need to have an abortion." I was shell-shocked. I couldn't respond. That was the last thing that I thought I would hear from him. But apparently lab work that he had looked at indicated that I had contacted or developed an infection that could cause birth defects, serious birth defects in the baby. And so his recommendation was to abort the baby. Of course, being the nurse that I am, I started asking some questions, because it didn't make any sense to me that I had contacted this particular infection, because I didn't know how I would have contacted it. And so I asked him if we could repeat the blood work, and he said yes, so we redid that. Besides that, we had some other tests done. He had spoken with a specialist, and after about 2 to 3 weeks of going back and forth with tests and decisions, it was still their recommendation that we terminate the pregnancy, even though there was some grayness to the results. And so that my husband and I chose to abort the baby in February of 1981. Wow.
So a lot of people think that, you know, and I say this often, that the reality is most married couples don't have abortions. And that is true to an extent, but obviously we know, especially with your circumstance, you were married, you were planning to start a family, yet here you are faced with this decision to abort. And I think that so many people get wrapped up in these medical ideas of why women should abort, and you were advised by your medical professionals in your life and your actual, doctor, to abort your child. So knowing that, I mean, kind of the thought process that I hear all the time is, well, you didn't have a choice. You were told to abort. Talk to me a little bit about that, because what I think you're going to say is that abortion affects us all. No matter why you choose abortion, you cannot walk away from abortion unharmed. And so I'm curious, from your point of view, being led by your medical professionals in your life to abort, how did you walk away from your abortion?
So I've come to realize that I did have a choice. At the time that we made the decision, I did not feel I had a choice. Partly with the fact that I didn't feel my opinion mattered. I did not have any help making that decision. And so to me, I made the decision thinking I had no other choice. But we do. And you know what? It doesn't matter. If this was the right thing to do, why did I hurt so bad? Why was it so painful? And I realized, as I have gone through the years with the healing and the education that I have had about abortion, is that we as humans are given a moral compass of right or wrong. And regardless of whether or not we believe in God or not, or we believe in the rightness or the wrongness of abortion, we still have this moral compass, and it will kick in no matter what we make, no matter what the decision is. And eventually it will get to the point where we're almost controlled by it, because we know that it was wrong.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And I so agree with you. So can you share with me some of the struggle that you had after your abortion? What are some of the consequences that you personally experienced from your abortion?
Initially, I was pretty numb for about the first week or two. And because I didn't consciously know that it was wrong or right. All I knew is that I wanted to have another child. And so we were told that we could try again in a few months. And so a year later, I did get pregnant, but I miscarried again at about 10 weeks. At that point, it became a lot more difficult. I had a lot of sadness. I believe I had the start of depression. I was angry. I was extremely sad. I had a very difficult time being around my friends and my family. I was at the age of having children, and so all my friends were having children. My sisters were having children and brothers. And so it was really painful. And deep down inside, there was this gnawing feeling that I had, and that was I was being punished. I grew up in a religion that led me to believe that God was a punishing God, and that everything you did wrong was a stroke against you. And this to me was the unforgivable sin. And so the longer I went, the more that began to eat on me. And if God was punishing me, then I was obviously a bad person. So what I didn't share was, after the miscarriage, I was unable to get pregnant after about 5 years of trying. And at that time, there was not a lot of options in terms of helping a couple get pregnant. I believe in vitro was just coming on board. I remember my physicians telling me that he wouldn't recommend that because he said I'd only have about a 17% chance of getting pregnant. And I think that's a lot higher right now. But anyway, I was at that period where it was either the natural way or not, none. And so after about 5 years of trying and not being pregnant, I gave up. I just said, I've had enough. I cannot do this anymore. But the feelings and the emotions didn't go away with that decision. Matter of fact, it became worse. And so I ended up walking out on my marriage and isolated myself from all my family and all my friends, and I just wallowed in my pain is all I can say. But during that period of time, which was about a year, I also continued to make some pretty bad choices, which only added to the fact of proving to myself that God was punishing me and that I was a bad person.
You know, it just breaks my heart so bad because I can relate to that. Now, I was able to have children after my 2 abortions, and so I don't have that same story, but I know for a lot of women that we work with within care, those that were not able to have children after abortion, they really struggle with thinking that God is punishing them, and that and kind of this idea that this is going to sound kind of brutal and harsh, but I killed my baby, so why would God give me another one? And we know that's not scriptural. God isn't a punishing God. He does discipline us, and there are some things that happen when we disobey God. But the reality is that a physical consequence to abortion can be infertility. It could be death for the woman. I mean, there's really bad consequences, and that doesn't mean that God's punishing us. So walk me through like where you are today. How did you like recognize like, oh my goodness, I need help. I'm struggling with the loss of my child. How did you recognize that need and get into abortion recovery?
I want to respond to one of the things that you said, BJ, and that at the time, I was about six or 7 years away from the abortion. I had no idea that infertility was a cause of abortion. So that did not come into play at all. It was I was being punished for the deed that I had done.
Yeah.
So how did I get to where I got today? Two words, my sister and God. I had a younger sister. Actually, she was about 6 years younger than I was. Kind of out of the clear blue during that period of time where I was isolated, sent me a letter with a package. It had a Bible in it, it had a little devotional, and it had a necklace with the cross on it. And the letter started out and just asked me if I had ever heard of Christ. Shortly after that, it wasn't really too long after that letter that she gave me, I gave my heart. I gave my heart to God. I realized that she had a lot to say in that letter to me, and her view of God was very different of mine, even though we grew up in the same household. And she saw God as a loving God and a God that didn't punish. And she wanted me to experience that.
I love that.
Honestly, tell you how I came to that decision, it had happened. And it changed my life. The abortion changed my life and had me go down a really bad path. And my decision to accept Jesus and walk with him began a path that I call more upward. My life did not get easy though at that point, which many people think Christians sometimes have a very easy life. Matter of fact, it became very difficult for a few years because now I knew right from wrong. And I also had to unlearn a lot of wrong information that at least it was wrong in how I interpreted it. I'm not going to honestly say that it was wrong in terms of how the church taught it, but the interpretation I had of it was very wrong. So first I had to learn from that God was a loving God and that he loved me and that he wasn't going to punish me. So I ended up in around 1990, which was 10 years after my abortion, that everything came to a head. My marriage ended, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to have children. So I had a lot of loss and a lot of endings that I had to deal with, and I just couldn't. I was not in an emotional state, and I ended up suffering a pretty major depressive episode that required some intense therapy and intense medication.
I'm so sorry that you went through that, but I love that the faithfulness of God, how he brought you through, and how you're able to use your experiences now to help others that have faced that. I have a question. I'm just curious, because your situation is so different than mine as far as, I mean, we both have abortion in our story, obviously, but the reasonings why we aborted are so different. And I mean, just all our stories are just completely different. But I'm curious, after your abortion, was it public? I mean, because you were, you know, a little bit further along in your pregnancy when you were encouraged to abort your child. And so people had to have, I'm assuming people had to have known that you were pregnant. So how did you kind of walk through that? And how did that, I'm just curious. I don't think I've ever talked about that side of that with you. And I'm just curious how you dealt with that, and was there secrecy? Because most of us who have chosen abortion rarely tell anyone. And so for you, who you were married, you were planning a family, you were excited about your pregnancy, and then kind of encouraged to abort, how did you walk through that journey, and how did that affect you?
Well, it was a secret. We decided not to tell anybody what we did. We said we were going to tell them I miscarried. Which, when I look back on that now, it's just so odd to me that, again, if this was the right decision, then why was it so wrong to share it?
Yeah.
Again, those are thoughts and feelings and that I've developed over the years. But that is something very key. So I knew that what I had done was wrong. So because we told everybody that we miscarried, that was what was believed for many, many, many years. It wasn't until I went through an abortion recovery Bible study in the mid-90s here in Texas that I realized that I could no longer hold that secret. But I was already in Texas, and it was kind of weird trying to call up people and say, hey, you know, back, you know, in 1980, I had an abortion. It really needed to be led by God as to who and when I told those people to, but I was willing to tell that secret.
Yeah.
To this day, a matter of fact, when this video comes out, I think there'll be some people that will be shocked, because some people still don't know, and it's not because it's a secret by any means, but it's just not something I've shared.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it just, you know, my heart just aches for the woman that's watching that is maybe gotten a health report from her OB and is encouraged to end the life of her child because of potential medical reasons. As someone who has experienced that, what would you say to that woman, to that family that is being encouraged by their doctor to end the life of their child for medical reasons?
That's a hard question to answer, because I believe every circumstance will be different. Not that I would ever encourage any woman or couple to abort, especially after what I went through. But it will depend on where they're at in the process. Are they ready to listen? Have they already made the decision? So my hope would be is that God would lead me in a way to share my story with them and the results of that story and what it's done to my life and what it did to relationships. Those were destroyed, and you can never get those back.
Yeah.
And my heart just goes out to anybody that would make a decision to have an abortion. Even if it wasn't due to medical reasons, but to take that life in our hands and make our own decision is not what God wants. And I know God would have taken care of whatever needed to be done at that point. You know, if it was that I would lose the baby within the pregnancy, or if the baby had a problem, that he would have been there to take care of it and help me take care of it. But I didn't rely on any of that. And I would hope that that is what I could convey to people, is that it may be a decision to make it easier for you right now, or because you don't want the baby to be born with birth defects, but the ramifications and the result are worse.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your heart on that. And by no means are we gonna, pass judgment on someone who is facing that decision. I mean, the reality is that most of us affiliated with CARE, we have the story of abortion. So regardless of why the woman or the couple chooses abortion at whatever season of life they're in, there's not judgment on that. We just know so intimately the pain and the consequences associated with abortion, and which is why we're so passionate about what we do. That's why we're doing these videos. That's why we're reaching out, because we want these men and women to know that no matter why you chose abortion, whether you were encouraged by your physician or your clergy or your family or financial reasons or pure selfish reasons, no matter why you chose abortion, there is help and healing through Jesus Christ. So as we close out tonight, Janet, one last kind of shout out to whoever's watching, whatever's on your heart, wrap us up and close us out tonight.
So I would want to share to anybody that's facing a decision based on medical recommendation, that you take the time to really understand what they're talking about. Find people that you can talk, excuse me, through with this. Hopefully God is in the picture and that you go to him. And that, because the decision that we make because of that, like I said, it'll have lifelong ramifications. Very similar to if you made a choice to have an abortion anyway, they're lifelong ramifications. And also, I'm going to reiterate what you said. And if the decision is to have the abortion, care and ministries like us are there to be with you and walk with you at a point when you're ready for it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much. And, again, just as we close out, if you're watching this tonight, and if Janet's story or any of the stories that we have listed here on YouTube or on Facebook reach your heart and it will touch somebody, please take a moment and just share it with them privately. Help us get the word out. We know, especially right now in the season of COVID-19, where people are being isolated more than ever before, and there's so much fear and unknown and uncertainties facing us, that if you're struggling with abortion in your past, that it could just be intensified right now. Those pains are so real. And you're not alone. We have not stopped doing ministry. We are still leading Bible studies. We have group options. We have one-on-one options. We have virtual options. It really is, it is so beneficial if you will just make that phone call. And I know how hard it is. I mean, I think for myself personally, CARE was in front of me so many times before I finally realized, okay, Lord, I will make the call. And I get that, but I promise you, if you have abortion in your past, whether you are the one that chose abortion, or maybe you drove your daughter to have an abortion, or maybe you forced a person to have abortion, encouraged a person to have an abortion, paid for a person to have an abortion, I really believe that our program will work for you. And it's nothing fancy, you know, I mean, it's intense, but it's a Bible study, and we will walk the journey of healing with you. You are not alone. And I promise you, this ministry has changed my life, and it's changed so many others. Please do not watch this video and go home, or I mean, you're probably already home, but don't end this video and think I'm the only one that had an abortion, because you're not. And our churches, our communities are full of men and women just like Janet and I that hurt silently for years before they get help. And that's just not necessary. We are here to help you. And we have an amazing Bible study program that will just lead you to truly receiving healing and forgiveness. So, so that's all we have tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you back again next Tuesday night, 8 p.m., and every Tuesday until the Lord tells us to stop. Thank you, and God bless.